It's time for our weekly confab with Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints.org. All things Illinois policy related. Here's a question, a famous one. Will the K through 12 system, as it's currently constructed, will it play in Peoria? You know the reference to that, by the way? Will it play in Peoria?
If it plays in Peoria, then, yeah, what was that from? What movie?
It's not from a movie.
Oh.
It's from maybe it was in a movie, but it's, but you know, the genesis
It's just like if it plays in Peoria, it'll.
Right, but what's the
make it on
genesis
main
of that?
Street.
What plays in Peoria?
What
era does it
comedy
come
sketch. It was a comedy sketch.
Yeah, vaudeville.
Vaudeville.
Yeah. I think, does Jack Mabley get credit for coming up with that? I'm not
If
sure.
it plays in Peoria. I'll be saying that all day now.
Well, Ted Dabrowski and colleagues did a report on the Peoria high schools in particular. And you'd be interested to hear the results. Let me give you a little hint. Not dissimilar to Chicago, Decatur, Rockford, East St. Louis. The big city and then all the mid-sized cities around the state that are suffering the same fate. Ted, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
So what is the situation with the Peoria schools when it comes to the basics, reading and math?
It is sad and dismal. There's 24 schools in the Peoria School District, so that's what they call SD 150. 24 schools, and 10 of them, not even 5 out of every 100 kids can read a grade level. So most of the kids across the board can't read a grade level, and the math scores are even worse. And so you've got the two big high schools. If you look at the juniors on the SAT, so you take this manual high school, 0% of blacks can do math at grade level. Same thing for Hispanics. What's interesting though is that it's 10% white, 11% white, 0% for whites. So they have succeeded in equity in manual high school, but it's not just there.
It must be. But before let me just stop you there, and I'll let you go on.
Sure.
But that success that you said, that equity that you just described, zeros across the board. That must be why half of those schools are designated as commendable by the Illinois State Board of Education.
Yeah, what's fascinating is they have four levels of measurement for schools now. The second best rating is called commendable, and commendable means deserving praise. So you've got these schools that nobody can read at grade level, and they're called commendable. And there's one school in the Peoria School District called exemplary, right? And that's the best rating, and less than a quarter of the kids can read at grade level at that school. So
at the exemplary school, they're just under a quarter of kids reading at grade level.
Yeah, imagine that.
That's something.
Yeah.
And this is what they tell parents, right? And then you look at anyway. So this the second high school, Peoria, it's almost the exact same result. So they have achieved, I think, the nirvana of equity, where everybody's equal, but at the very, very worst bottom of the scale, and that's sad. And then you start looking at all the same stuff we've seen in Decatur and Chicago, and then 100% of teachers at the school district, SD 150, are proficient or excellent. Mm-hmm. So, not 95, not 90, not 85, 100.
Well, they rate themselves, don't they? Which is so absurd.
No, they well.
What do they do?
You rate me and I rate you. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Dan, you're doing a good job, Dan.
Yeah.
So what happens? They're just going to sit and live like this? I mean, this is unless their parents take them out and try and take them to private school or Catholic school.
Well, and that's the sad story. So they make the excuses. So we were lucky to have two TV stations pick up and do nice pieces on it. They really highlighted the data. They crunched the data. They put it on there, and the responses from the school district were, well, and they're right. Look, I'm not going to disagree with the fact that a lot of these kids are very poor, have very struggling situations at home, maybe single parents, maybe they got trauma, lack of food. There's a lot of problems. There's no denying that. But what they've done down there is they use that as an excuse for the results. They no longer have to teach. And I'm arguing now that these are no longer schools. These are basically centers to house kids, to keep them off the streets, to give them food, to provide what they say is mental health support and things like that. The superintendent came at us, but just blamed this all on historical racism and classism.
Right.
The same old thing. And what really ticks me off, this goes back to Governor Pritzker in his debate with Bailey during the gubernatorial race, where Pritzker said that this stuff wasn't true. When the Wall Street Journal wrote the editorial piece on our Decatur and statewide work, Pritzker said that we were carnival barkers, that this isn't true, that this data is not true. It's his own data. And there has to be a reckoning with Governor Pritzker denying this data and just dismissing it like he does, and the whole system too. Of course, there won't be, but there should be, because this is the absolute failure for Peoria, for Decatur, for Rockford, for the whole state. 10 and 15 years from now, these kids are all going to be out in the workforce, and they won't be able to perform.
Something that the superintendent in Peoria said that you hear all the time when you talk about proficiencies in reading and math based on testing. She said that measuring students' ability to read via that test, that's a narrow view of success. Being able to read and focusing so much on that, that's just a very narrow view of success, really. I wonder if maybe we could get somebody on the record who believes that to explain what is success then. If my view is too narrow, then give me an expansive view. What is success for the kids in your charge, according to you? Do we have an answer to that? So does any of the teachers union or any superintendent told us what success is if reading and math are very narrow, proficiency in reading and math are very narrow views of success?
Yeah. They love to say we're cherry picking the data. Well, if you look at one of the reports that the superintendent does, the first thing that comes up on her report is reading and math scores. But they don't analyze it; they just report it, and you can't really see what's going on. I love how my colleague John Klinger said it. Right. So, like you said, the superintendent says it's a very, very narrow view of success. So she cares more about the socially, emotionally, and physically support that children get. Well, John says, how much social and emotional and physical success is a kid going to have when he or she graduates and can't read and do math?
Well, exactly.
They're going to be crippled. They're going to be crippled.
Clarion call's been put out for teachers the world over, or at least the country over. Come to Illinois. Teachers, has your state become hostile to your autonomy, your rights, and the mission of education? If yes, I say, come to Illinois. We're hiring, and we'd love to have you. This opinion piece by a state superintendent of education, Tony Sanders, fresh off his expansive view of success at U46 up there in Elgin. Governor Pritzker recently signed legislation making Illinois the first state of the nation to outlaw book banning. Our state values your expertise as an educator, blah, 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 blah. So particularly you teachers in Florida and Texas, if the states become hostile to you, come to Illinois, Ted.
That was a phenomenal piece. I saw that last night and just had to, Tony Sanders, in the same boat with Pritzker. Tony Sanders was running U46. He gets elevated when the previous superintendent retired. So Tony Sanders gets elevated from Elgin, second largest school district in the state. But then you start stripping his numbers. He was there for I think it was 11 years. He owns every single number at that school district. And that's where you see 1 out of 10 kids reading. It's disastrous results.
There you go again. Your narrow view of success.
There he goes again.
Yeah.
And so he's out there writing this absurd letter. And it's interesting because he makes some of our case for us that they're already overpaid. He says that we have the second highest pay in the country, which is what we've been saying. So pay isn't an issue. Money's not an issue. But if they're having problems in Illinois, it's because it's just not a good place to teach. We talk about school choice.
What are you talking about? 100% of the teachers in Peoria and Chicago, for that matter, are rated excellent or superhuman or whatever they're rated.
Yeah. So if they're having a hard time getting them, then So it's again that typical not truth-telling that we do here in Illinois that's bastardizing our whole system.
And I don't know where they come up with the money, but the St. Charles District 303 Superintendent Paul Gordon, he just got a raise. So our salary is $267,800 for the 2023-24 year.
Well, I mean, where do they come up with the money? Your property taxes. So there you go. That's your school board. And
I can't wait to see his pension.
Oh, yeah. Well, we were about to release the superintendent report on pensions, so you'll see that pretty soon. And you'll see how fascinating, right? So guys from like Calumet City, he's number one on the list. His lifetime pensions will be over $10 million. And he was busted for corruption, nepotism. The results are horrendous in Calumet City, but he's going to have I think it's over $300,000 pension and $10 million. And but what the heck? That's just the running rate now.
Well, you can't put a price on an expansive view of success and the kind of
excellence.
Yeah, and excellence, exactly right. By the way, just on this Tony Sanders piece too, to show you what a dishonest person he is.
He locked kids in rooms, by the way, that didn't have masks on.
In his op-ed, here in Illinois, we don't shy away from our complex histories or identities. While Texas tries to ban discussions about race and Florida forbids teachers from saying gay, we have revised our social studies standards in the opposite direction and so on and so forth. I mean, it's really just reprehensible to be such a inveterate liar like Tony Sanders is, in addition to...
Did you read the bill?
In addition to, participating in these, what I would call criminal organizations, U46, CPS, the Peoria 150. These are criminal organizations. Where are those with their racketeering torches out for Trump on these organizations?
Yeah, Dan, like you said, the lies in there are so powerful. He talks about the way that the media's tried to talk about the don't say gay and the black studies in Florida and all that. So he of course stretches that, and then he talks about it in Illinois terms as if we're doing great things, when in fact there's so much indoctrination going on in the classrooms. And we passed this what was culturally responsive teaching standards, right? So it's more the indoctrination of kids in Illinois on critical race theory. So it's the double whammy of the lies on both ends. And by the way, Dan, we should talk about this. Somebody made a good point. If you're in Peoria, isn't there some kind of room for a class action suit by parents against these school districts for their failure? It's something interesting about that, because if you're in these schools where nobody can read, isn't there some obligation, some kind of liability, especially for taxpayers? I don't know. Anyway.
Well, the governor says you have a right to free speech, but you don't have a right to deceive. Well, are these school districts engaged in illegal deception by the governor's standard? That'd be an interesting question to ask.
Yeah.
Or maybe the basis for legislation. I mean, if you didn't have, of course, socialist supermajorities in both chambers, but this is the way it's going. Stupidity and unconstitutionality, as the federal judge said of Pritzker's targeting of pregnancy care centers. Stupidity and unconstitutionality, and just general depravity. Those are the hallmarks of this state under this political leadership. Ted Dabrowski, President, Wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Thanks as always, Ted.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Don't defund the police. Hire the police to protect your business. Rising crime has been crippling business owners in Illinois more and more in the past year. Blue Star Security can protect your most valuable asset, your business, to protect both you and your customers. Blue Star Security is the only security company in Chicago with over 500 off-duty police officers, all W-2 employees.
I'm Anthony Varsha.